In the grand theatre of Western history, few stories are as powerful or as paradoxical as the life of Epictetus. Imagine a man born into the absolute lowest rung of society, a slave, not even given a name at birth. Now imagine that same man rising to become one of the most influential thinkers of his time, a master of philosophy whose ideas would echo through millennia, guiding emperors and inspiring prisoners of war. This isn't a myth. This is the story of Epictetus, the slave who became a master, not of others, but of himself. It's a story that proves true freedom isn't about your circumstances. It's about the unshakable strength you can build within your own mind. Born around 50 AD in what is now Turkey, he was just another piece of property. When he was purchased and shipped to Rome, his new owner gave him a label, not a name, Epiktetos, which in Greek simply means acquired. He was now the property of Epaphroditus, a powerful and wealthy freedman who served as the administrative secretary to the infamous Emperor Nero. Think about that environment, a palace filled with paranoia, cruelty, and absolute power, where his very life depended on the whims of his owner. It was here, in this suffocating powerlessness, that Epictetus discovered a lifeline: Stoicism. He began attending the lectures of Musonius Rufus, one of the great Stoic teachers of Rome. For the young slave, this wasn't just some intellectual hobby. Philosophy wasn't a luxury, it was a survival kit. Stoicism offered a radical, life-altering idea. Your happiness does not depend on external things, not on wealth, not on health, not even on your own physical freedom. Why? Because all of those things can be taken from you at any moment. True, lasting happiness, the Stoics argued, depends only on what is truly yours, what is within your complete control, your judgments, your choices, and how you choose to respond to the world around you. This philosophy was about to be tested in the most brutal way imaginable. There's a famous story about Epictetus that perfectly illustrates his incredible resolve. One day, his master, Epaphroditus, in a fit of cruel rage, began to twist his slave's leg. As the pressure and the pain intensified, Epictetus didn't scream or beg. He remained calm, looked his master in the eye, and simply warned him, "You will break it." Epaphroditus, likely enraged by this lack of fear, continued twisting until the bones snapped. But even then there was no outburst of anger, no cry of despair. Epictetus just looked at his broken limb and said, "Didn't I tell you you would break it?" Let that sink in for a moment. In that horrific instant, who was the real master and who was the slave? Epaphroditus had control over Epictetus's body. He could break his bones, but he couldn't break his spirit. He could inflict pain, but he couldn't force Epictetus to despair. This is the core Stoic principle, the dichotomy of control in action. The pain was an external, something happening to him. For Epictetus, the real evil would have been to betray his own principles, to surrender his inner calm and become consumed by hatred or fear. He limped for the rest of his life, a constant physical reminder of his time in bondage, but his mind remained unbroken and free. Eventually, Epictetus gained his legal freedom, a process known as manumission. He immediately began doing what he was born to do, teaching philosophy. He set up his own school in Rome, sharing the wisdom that had saved him. But his blunt honesty and unwavering principles didn't sit well with everyone, especially those in power who relied on fear and control. Around the year 93 AD, the paranoid Emperor Domitian decided he'd had enough of philosophers questioning authority and challenging the status quo. He banished all of them from Italy. For many, this would have been a devastating blow, the end of a career. For Epictetus, it was just a change of address. A true Stoic, he saw this not as a catastrophe, but as another external event outside his control. So, he packed up his simple life and moved to Nicopolis, a bustling city in western Greece. And here the ultimate irony unfolds. The former slave, banished from Rome, founded a new school of philosophy. It quickly became one of the most respected and influential schools in the entire Roman Empire. The sons of Rome's most powerful families, the very elite who had cast him out, now traveled to Greece to sit at his feet and learn the meaning of wisdom from a man who had once been considered less than human. Like his philosophical hero Socrates, Epictetus never wrote a single word down. He believed philosophy wasn't a dusty theory to be read in a book. It was a living, breathing, daily practice. It was something you did, not something you just talked about. His profound teachings could have been lost to history forever if it weren't for one of his most dedicated students, a young man named Arrian. Arrian meticulously transcribed Epictetus's lectures, preserving them for us in the volumes we now know as the Discourses. He also compiled a short, punchy summary of his master's key principles into a book called the Enchiridion, which literally means the handbook. It was designed to be a guide you could carry with you everywhere, a mental toolkit for navigating the challenges of life. And Epictetus lived exactly what he taught. His life in Nicopolis was one of radical simplicity. It said his only possessions were a straw mat to sleep on, a simple cloak, and an old iron lamp. One night, a thief broke into his home and stole the lamp. When Epictetus discovered the theft, he wasn't angry. He didn't curse his bad luck. Instead, he calmly reflected that the thief had actually made a very poor trade. To gain a simple lamp, an object of little value, the thief had traded away his own character, his integrity. Epictetus had only lost a lamp, an external indifferent. The next day, he simply replaced it with an even cheaper one made of clay, making a joke that if the thief came back, he wouldn't be so tempted. This kind of attitude is often mistaken for being cold or emotionless, but a beautiful story from Epictetus's later life completely shatters that stereotype. Stoicism isn't about crushing your emotions, it's about not being a slave to them, so that you are free to act with compassion and do your duty. By now, Epictetus was an old man, living a solitary life. He then learned that a friend's child was about to be abandoned to die, a sadly common practice at the time. A caricature of a Stoic might have dismissed this as an external event, something beyond their concern. But Epictetus, the true Stoic, saw it as a call to his fundamental duty as a human being. Without hesitation, he adopted the child himself. And this old single man, who had lived in Spartan solitude for decades, brought a woman into his home to help him care for and raise the boy. This single act speaks volumes. It proves his philosophy was never about escaping the world. It was a powerful framework for acting rightly within it, free from the anxieties and fears that so often paralyze us from doing good. The legacy of Epictetus is simply immense. His handbook was a constant companion to one of the greatest Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius, whose own private journal, Meditations, is filled with echoes of Epictetus's teachings. Nearly 2,000 years later, a U.S. Navy pilot named James Stockdale was shot down over Vietnam and spent over 7 years as a prisoner of war, enduring regular torture. He later said it was the philosophy of Epictetus that gave him the mental fortitude to survive and lead his fellow prisoners, turning the worst experience imaginable into a defining test of his character. The journey of Epictetus, from a nameless slave to a master of himself, is the ultimate proof of his central teaching. We are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of them. He showed the world that the heaviest chains are not made of iron that bind our wrists, but are the ones we forge in our own minds, chains of fear, anxiety, and anger. And more importantly, he showed us that we all hold the key to unlock them. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the life of one of history's most inspiring figures. If you found this story as powerful as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories about the wisdom of the ages. Let me know in the comments which philosopher's story you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious.